All right. Today we are going to uncover something that so many individuals ask, and that is the question, will I ever lose weight? And some might actually put in actually in there. Will I ever actually lose weight? Because for some of us, this is a question that has haunted us for years. Will I ever lose weight? And something that my daughter said put this into such brilliant perspective, and that's how I want to share with you today. My daughter has a birthday on November 4th, which is super close to Christmas. I feel bad for her because my birthday is in July, which meant like every 6 months I was getting presents, so like baller status. But her birthday is so close to Christmas, I feel like sometimes she gets the short end. And we were having one of those daddy daughter coffee dates, and I just asked her, I'm like, hey, what do you like most about Christmas? Like, what are you most excited about? And I just sat there waiting for her response. And she said, I don't really like Christmas. Like, I, I'm, s- I'm sorry, because literally this is the first time I've ever heard a kid say I don't like Christmas. And I'm like, I like does not compute. So I asked her, I'm like, what about Christmas don't you like? And she goes on to tell me, well, I don't like Christmas because Christmas is when things always go away. And this was fascinating to me because while my daughter's been alive, we've lost my father, we've lost my sister, and we've had loss, but none of it has occurred over that holiday. So I was really curious at this point. So I asked her, I'm like, could you explain a little more? And she's like, yeah, like every year, because my birthday happens and Christmas happens, a lot of my favorite toys have to go away. I'm like, oh, I get it. I don't understand why that's what she's taking away. But what she's talking about is she has to get rid of her old toys to get new toys. And what's fascinating about that is she remembers the having to give away and that a lot of her favorite toys go away, but she doesn't remember all that she's getting. And it's a fascinating case study on the power of perception, because I feel like perception is one of those things that we take for granted and we don't question that often. I mean, let's say let's use $30,000 for example. What's your perception of $30,000? Well, if you're a kid in high school, $30,000 is ballin'. But if you're a 40-year-old with a master's degree, you're like, that's not worth my time to even apply for that job. The money in the job hasn't changed, but the perspective has. And so that's what we're going to wrestle with today. And I want to look at it through the lens of James 1, 2, 3. Look at that. It is that catchy. James 1, verses 2 and 3. Trials and temptations. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Again, James 1, 2, 3. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Like, sit with that for a moment. Think about the trials and the tribulations you've had in your life. Raise your hand if you were like, those are some of the best times of my life. No, they're not. Some of us are going through trials and tribulations right now, and it's like, this might be the worst part of my existence. But what's fascinating is perception. And much like my daughter's perception of the holidays is that toys go away, we also have the ability to change that perception and be reminded, well, toys only go away because we've only got so much room in the house. Where are we going to put all the new toys that grandma's getting you? And so it's through that lens that I want us to consider the answer to this question: will I ever lose weight? Will I ever lose weight? The answer to that question is yes, if you want to. Now, hold up now, because I know a lot of people are saying, no, Jeremy, I really, 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 really want to lose weight. Why would you even ask me that question? I'm here because I want to lose weight and I've not quite had that experience yet. How can you answer my question, will I ever lose weight, with a yes if you want to? Well, very easy, because it's the perception of your struggle. So when I say that, I acknowledge that you really, 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 really want to lose weight. And my question to that is, are the actions that you're doing supporting that? And I think that's where the challenge starts to become, because quite often we will say we want something and then we'll act in another way. And what's fascinating about this, if you take it one step further, and this is not just true in weight loss, this is true in all of our lives, we get what we accept. Let that sink in for a minute. So whether it's dating, job offers, if you work in a creative space and you're selling your services, you get what you accept. And if you only accept things that are mediocre, but not actually achieving what you want, well, then you're only going to have mediocre results. Now, what what does this look like? Well, when it comes to the concept of acceptance of how you're being treated, one layer further is that quite often we don't set up healthy boundaries. This is one of the things that I will die on the hill for. If you're struggling with being overweight, or if you're struggling with body image, or if you're struggling with anything in health and wellness, to me, it all relates back to having proper boundaries. Now, you may say, what? That has nothing to do with my exercise or my eating. How in the world, Rochford, do boundaries have anything to do with this? So let's say you don't have time to exercise. That's fair. I would make the argument that you do have time to exercise, but proper boundaries to make exercise a priority in your life have not either been set up or adhered to. So if you have a job where you work 8 hours and you're paid to work 8 hours, but people keep asking you for that ninth hour and that 10th hour of work, and now you don't have time to exercise because of work. Well, no, you actually don't have time because of the boundaries that weren't set up. And if you accept people to treat your time that way, well, then it's what we talked about earlier. You get what you accept. And it's the same thing with food. If you feel that eating healthy is way too expensive, then you've accepted some priorities with the boundaries of how you spend your money that don't support your efforts. I offer a weight loss mentorship where I work one-on-one with individuals. Sometimes it's to lose weight, sometimes it's to gain weight, but it's all around getting people happy with their health. The number one reason why people do not work with me is they say they can't afford it. Literally 100% of those times during our phone call before we have that conversation, they're telling me that they're eating out 3 to 4 times a week. Which means if their boundaries were to increase their health, they would just take that money that they were using to make themselves sad and unhappy and pivot it to greater health. They don't have a money issue, they have a boundary issue. They've given fast food or that way of life way too much freedom in their lives. They've accepted that. They've not set up those boundaries. So when it comes to actually improving their health, they feel like they don't have the money. And one last example before we really start to unpack these. If you hate what the scale says, but it keeps going up, you've not set a proper boundary with what the scale means to you. Some people hate the scale. Some people love the scale. Some people obsess over the scale. But if you keep being unhappy with the scale reflects something in your life that you're not doing. And this is the argument I'm making. It has to do with the boundary. So for me, 200 pounds is my cap. If I get to 200 pounds, I just got to call it. Because for my height, there's no reason for me to go over 200 pounds. But that's my boundary. 199, still okay. 200, whoa. Let's take a minute. Let's look. Because the scale really is a reflection of the boundaries I've set. I set caloric boundaries. I keep overstepping them. Boom. Scale reflects it. I set time boundaries for exercise. I keep overstepping those boundaries or let other people overstep those boundaries so I don't have the time. Boom. The scale reflects that. Now, this sounds like it's like a Debbie Downer moment. Wah, wah. But to me, this is one of the greatest pieces of information ever. Because I don't need it. Well, we don't have to do a show of hands, but if you're really feeling it, you can give me a show of hands. When you come to planning how you're going to lose weight, is boundaries at the top of your list? Do you sit and go, I'm going to change some boundaries, and that's going to help me shed some weight and get these killer abs? No one talks about boundaries, which is why it's amazing, because this is something that most people can't say, well, I've tried that and it's failed. Good news, you've not failed. You've not even tried this. So let's unpack this so you can actually try it. There are 5 boundaries that psychologists agree are vital for health and wellness. And what I'm going to suggest as you go through this and start thinking, don't try to change all of them. If you want to, have at it. But what I would recommend is just try to change one boundary. And once you've got that taken care of, try some more. If you've got that zest, go all at it. But my only concern is the higher the high, the lower the low. But these are the 5 that psychologists agree are all important for mental and health with emotion. So emotional boundaries, material boundaries, time and energy boundaries, I call that the attention boundary, physical boundaries, and mental boundaries. Again, these are the 5 that psychologists agree are important for overall health and wellness. Having healthy emotional boundaries, having healthy material boundaries, so stuff, having healthy time and energy boundaries, so what are you giving your attention, having healthy physical boundaries, and having healthy mental boundaries. Now, I'm going to encourage you to literally just pick one of these to work on this next week. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the reason why I only want you to pick one is because almost as important as changing some of these boundaries is acknowledging the lack of boundaries in our lives. Because for me, that's where the power comes into play. Because we can't manage what we don't understand is actually going on in our lives. So here is my challenge. I implore you to pick one of these 5. What are you giving your attention to? What are you doing with your emotions? What are you doing with your materials? So finance and things. What are you doing with your mental, education, learning? What are you doing with your physical? And I would love for you to think about that. Attention. Are there things you're giving your attention to that get in the way of a better life when it comes to health and wellness? Is there something taking your attention away from exercise? Is there something taking your attention away from healthy meal planning so you feel like buying an $18 salad is the only way to eat healthy? Is there something taking your attention away from getting enough sleep? Have you set proper boundaries with your attention? If not, I would love for you to maybe pick that one. But emotional. Have we given food and our old way of life that keeps us overweight inappropriate emotional attachment? If someone came up to you and was like, yo, you probably shouldn't have half a dozen donuts every week, Would you get angry about that? Are you emotionally attached to these foods? Have we come to a point where we can't separate the people we're with versus the food that's happening at the potluck? So maybe it's an emotional boundary that you need to work on this week. Maybe it's a material boundary. Maybe you spend so much time and money on wonderful things. Like you've got a house full of amazing knickknacks and collectibles. But if your A1C is high or you're pre-diabetic or could reverse your diabetes, all because you could use that time and maybe that money to invest in your health, then maybe you don't have great material boundaries. And if that's the case, I implore you to look into that. Mental boundaries. Some individuals feel like they hit a point in life where they stop learning. Is that you? Or do you agree with what neuroscience says due to neuroplasticity and the fact that you can teach old dog new tricks? Because we have the ability to create new pathways, which then create habits, which then creates a lifestyle. So literally, even if you've been struggling with being overweight your entire life, you could change that. It might not be that hard. It might be more simple than you think, but it takes understanding that you can to start that. And if you never give yourself appropriate boundaries and you feel like, well, I'm done with high school, I don't need to learn anymore, or I'm done with college, or I'm too, like, why would I read a book? I got Netflix. Maybe you have unhealthy mental boundaries. Same thing with physical boundaries. How do you feel about yourself physically? Do you love yourself when you look in the mirror? Do you hate yourself when you look in the mirror? Is there a certain clothing size that is appropriate for your height and your age? Are you past that? Have you kept a proper boundaries? Or has it just been, well, every 3 years I just get a new pant size because that's life? So whatever those are, whether it's tension, emotional, material, mental, physical, I'd love for you to do two things for me this week. One, start looking in your life at all the reasons why you feel you can't lose weight or why it's such a struggle. And then I implore you to ask yourself, not if, but how. How is this related to an improper boundary in my life? Make a note. If you've got an iPhone, make a note of it. If you're vintage like me, write it down. And then just choose one of what you write down and start going after it. I'm just going to use attention as an example because to me, I think that's one that so many individuals struggle with. The internet is a vast amount of information that can serve us, but quite often doesn't. Same with YouTube and Netflix. If you're more excited about The Mandalorian than you are about taking steps towards getting healthier, you may have boundaries with your attention. And that's not throwing shade at The Mandalorian. Loves me some Baby Yoda. But if you're not happy with how you look and how you feel and where your health is, and instead of giving that attention, you're giving Netflix attention, well, then you've accepted that the television is more important in your life than your health. And you've got to reassess those boundaries. So those are the two things I'm going to challenge you with this week. One, start to be aware of these 5 boundaries in your life and where they're starting to be infringed upon. And then number 2, pick one of those and get to work on it. I would love to know this time next week what you came up with, what's changed, how things are different. Because when you start going under the problem and attacking the roots of it, well, all of a sudden the big problem starts to wither because one by one you're taking away that root system away, and it can't survive whenever there's nothing feeding the root. So if you start making better habits by having better boundaries, one by one, you're going to find yourself taking that much many more steps. How about those words together? That much many more. One by one, step by step, you'll be that closer to weight loss. So will you ever lose weight? As soon as you are ready, 100% you will. But first, it comes by acknowledging that to some degree, there's been some acceptance of the lifestyle you're living. And it's because of improper boundaries. Great news, you control that. If you've had enough, then you've had enough. Make the change. If you need some help, just let me know. You can shoot me a message. You know where to find me on Facebook. You've got the Rochford Wellness Academy. You can always get me there. But if you've had enough and you've had enough and you're ready to make a change and set up some boundaries, let's get to work. Let's pray.